Welcome to part 3 of the School Subjects Trilogy. There are many famous trilogies, but none as successful as this. Less than 100 views, blows Star Wars, Planet of the Apes, Batman, The Hangover, which I feel like I have after editing these videos. Seriously, I've probably developed severe sleep deprivation at this point, reaching these arbitrary weekly deadlines. Speaking of deadlines, that brings us to the Empire Strikes Back level cliffhanger I left us on at the end of part 2. History. For me, what taints this class more than anything is the time crunch we're put under for our presentations. It hits especially hard when we go from 0 to 100, spending one day almost passing out from a monotonous lecture, immediately to an assignment more intense than talkies. Regarding the lectures, though, they could certainly be worse. For example, I know most teachers wouldn't play nearly as many videos as mine does, which adds more variety. The videos aren't just your typical John Green either, though he does get too much hate. Hashtag fuck the Mongols. We also have oversimplified as well. There were a lot of John Oliver videos, though, which I could go without. But hey, it's better than Trevor Noah. With Sam O'Nella being back, maybe I could convince him to play some of his videos too. Well, I would, but I don't have to take history anymore, baby. I can take psychology instead. I'm sure my history teacher almost wishes he could switch to psychology as well, as he would always go off on psychological tangents during his lectures. I especially enjoyed his one on René Descartes, who said, "I think, therefore I am," as I was going through an existential crisis at the time, and it was comforting to see other kids in my class go through the same insurmountable pain of questioning why the hell we're here. We're not alone, Griff. Jesus, that sounded masochistic. These lectures were another part that made his lessons more engaging, but the engagement is still only slightly more secure than a bachelor one when you're dealing with the ancient Greeks and Roman Empire. Although I will confess I was somewhat intrigued by the Renaissance, since it had more current applications such as freedom of thought and religion. I additionally got to make a video essay in similar vein to this, as opposed to a presentation for my assignment on Louis de Leon, a Renaissance writer. Definitely an interesting unit, more so than social studies from my earlier years, that's for sure. That shit was more redundant than a YouTuber trying to drag their video to a certain time limit. I legitimately spent 8 years learning about First Nation culture almost exclusively. Great to know, but I think it could have been cut a little short. Next up, we have French. My thoughts should be clear from the middle act, but I'm obviously not the biggest fan of French. I guess Français. Wow, chill. I just mean the subject, not its people. Okay, maybe it's people. And how people think that's all Canada is, even though Quebec only makes up about a quarter of our population. No, we're not Mounties either. Anyways, as for the class, my main problem with it was its focus on grammar. The only possible way I would use French would be orally, as would most people, as our government doesn't require you to write any passages in French. Hell, you don't even need to be good at oral either, so why do I have to waste my time learning the 4 different ways you say the, or the gender of a pencil? I'm surprised the anti-woke crowd hasn't targeted the French yet. That seems like exactly what they would criticize. I guess they're too busy hating on actual unique Star Wars content. Instead of focusing on these minute details, just teach us some basic French vocabulary. Sure, you could just use good old Google Translate, but I think having some vocabulary memorized would be more useful, so I can at least have something easy to show off at a party. Okay, I don't get invited to parties, but if I did, imagine the pickup lines. Hey girl, I'm not like those other guys who just want to fuck. I want to seal. Get it? Just teaching vocabulary would also shorten the class way more. I should not have to take it for 5 years, and have almost nothing of value to show for it. The sole praise I can give the class is thanks to my main teacher. She would try her absolute best to include as many games and activities as possible, and would explain things really well. Better than that Duolingo bastard. I know my streak is broken. Quit nagging me, bitch. Now for the class I have the least to complain about, science. This is mainly due to basically everything in the class up to this point being practical or interesting in some way, and the sheer multitude of concepts we covered. Instead of each year simply being a cheap DLC to the previous, we were receiving a full-on game with the number of new things we would study. The only thing I really didn't enjoy was convex mirrors. People probably think I have some form of body dysmorphia because I'm too terrified to look in the mirror, but it's really just lingering trauma from that hell of a unit. The only negative I can justifiably hold against science, though, is not having an actual science lab until this year, so we were severely limited on the experiments we could do. I mean, we didn't get to make any explosions, and only got to dissect a frog once, as any lab we did essentially had to be brought in by our teacher from home, with her having to supply most of the tools. Don't ask where she got a dead frog body, alright, PETA? That was one of the few things my school did have. This actually makes the situation more terrifying. If my teacher did kill a frog, she could at the very least claim it was for science. The school itself, on the other hand, just another strike for the principal. First removing teachers he didn't like from last episode, and now potentially slaughtering frogs? After everything the Frog and Toad series did for your library. On a more serious note, on a teacher's salary, mine shouldn't have to pay out of pocket to give us supplies. Perhaps if my school put more of their budget into anything other than sports, that would be a reality. That's the perfect segue into my most personally despised subject, gym, or phys ed, or PE. This bitch has more names than Team Rocket has alter egos. This class is truly the biggest cash cow I've ever seen. It has even stolen the entire budget from the film club, banishing it to the abyss, instead utilizing the funds for some new soccer posts. As for why the class in general is utter trash, I will admit that I'm a bit biased. If you've seen my disability video, you'd know I have cerebral palsy, which renders a lot of sports impossible for me to do. Thankfully, this doesn't affect my grade. Even my school isn't that twisted. But it does affect my enjoyment of the class. Putting my bias aside, though, the main grievance I have with physical education is its names. Even with all of them, it still can't find one that fits. Despite being called physical education, I've learned more about sports from watching two kids kick a ball back and forth once than I have in 10 years of class. You're just expected to know how to play all these sports and all of their rules. It may seem obvious to the average person, but as someone with zero sports experience, asking me where the three-point line in basketball is located is as challenging a question as my existential crisis. And since they didn't teach us anything, I'm still kinda unsure after watching students play for a full decade. They wouldn't just not teach us anything, though. They would pretend that they did. I remember going into the gym one day and being asked to write a test regarding the positions of football. No in-class study time given. I'm sure it would go over real well if I went into the math room and was thrown an algebra exam without any prior instruction. On the bright side, though, I would rather have the class name be grossly inaccurate than have the education part relate to sports history. That's equivalent to a class on any other interest. If I'm learning about the lore of the basketball, why shouldn't I be learning about the lore and evolution of video game controllers, huh? I think this emphasizes my most frustrating thing regarding PE, being that it just flat out shouldn't exist as a class, but could work really well as an elective or club. Think about it. It focuses on a personal interest, being sports, rather than a widely applicable field, such as the infamously hated math. There's a reason why it's called math in the UK, because it covers multiple areas. Yet another reason why math is superior. Its alternate names actually make sense. I will concede that your appreciation of math, much like English, will be sourced from what type of teacher you have. In grade 8, I had one that was clearly going through some mental hurdles, so he wasn't in the right headspace to teach us properly, or even properly mark our exams, since he never inputted our algebra ones online. So, when he went on stress leave and a new teacher transferred in, we had no proof that we had already destroyed algebra's declaration of challenge, as the save data had corrupted, so we had to start over from scratch. Thankfully, the years following that one have done a complete 180, with my current teacher being hailed as the best in the province. He's also more openly passionate about math than I am about Persona 6 speculation, and if you know me in real life, you know that's saying something. There's times where he'll stumble on his words more so than a certain prime minister, just because he's so happy we got the correct answer or mastered a formula. Math also doesn't force you to take its more advanced, less widely applicable courses at my school either, giving you the option to choose workplace and apprenticeship as an alternative, which prepares you to head into the trades, teaching you conversions, surface area, trigonometry, and angles, commonly misspelled as angels. With AI threatening to take over so many jobs, trade positions are likely going to skyrocket in demand, so it's nice to see a class to actually prepare you for them. All I'll say regarding the electives I've taken, to save us from ruining the perfect trio with the fourth installment, is that there was clearly some serious election fraud going on. Oh God, why'd I open the floodgates, especially with current events? I didn't get to choose art, home ec, or shop, but still had to take them all for 3 years. I could understand doing a year-long trial run to test the waters, but 3? That's maybe the only time where 3 isn't the magic number after all. Thank you to anyone who has watched this miniseries. It was certainly an experience editing all these constant pictures, but I hope it satisfies our degrading attention spans. One last parting message from my photography teacher. Don't put that you think I've really improved in my final report card message, but only up my grade 1% from the last term. That's worse math than angles, I swear on the angels.